Have you ever felt like someone was trying to tell you something? Like an invisible force was pushing you toward a truth the world had forgotten? That's exactly what happened on one cold night when a retired police dog refused to stop barking at an old tree. And what Officer Grace Turner discovered that evening would change everything, not just for her, but for an entire family that had lived in darkness for nearly 4 decades. This is the kind of story that reminds you why we pay attention to the small moments, the strange instincts, the things that don't make sense until everything suddenly does. Grace had been driving that forest road 100 times before. She knew every curve, every shadow, every reason people avoided this area after dark. But on this particular night, something was different. Her cruiser radio had been quiet all evening, which meant she'd have time to think. Time to remember her partner, Rex, a German shepherd who'd spent years helping officers like her do impossible work. When his handler passed away, Grace couldn't bear to see Rex go to some uncertain future. She brought him home. He deserved better than that. Most nights, Rex slept soundly in her house. Content. Peaceful. The way retired service dogs should be. But this night was different. Around midnight, he started pacing. Then the barking started, not the casual bark of a bored dog wanting attention. This was urgent. Desperate. This was the bark she remembered from his work in Dazed. One that meant something was wrong. Grace tried everything. She brought him inside. She gave him water, treats, a distraction. Nothing worked. Rex kept heading toward the door, kept barking like his life depended on it, and she knew him well enough to know he wasn't acting without reason. This dog had been trained to detect things, to sense danger and opportunity in ways humans couldn't. So she did something most people would think was crazy. She grabbed his collar, got in her cruiser, and drove toward the forest. The mist was thick that night, rolling across the road like something alive. Grace got her headlights low, not wanting to disturb the quiet. Rex whined the entire drive, pressing his nose against the window. When they reached a particularly isolated stretch, his ears went straight up. Grace pulled over, cut the engine, and opened the door. The moment his paws hit the ground, Rex bolted. She ran after him, flashlight in one hand, her other ready on her holster. Old habits die hard. Trees seemed to reach out from the darkness, branches catching on her uniform. And then Rex stopped. He planted himself in front of an enormous oak tree, the kind that had probably been standing here since before Grace was born. His fur was bristling. His teeth were bared, and he was barking like he was calling out to the entire universe. "Easy, boy," Grace whispered, keeping her voice steady. "What is it?" She shone her light up the massive trunk, and that's when she saw it. Niente basse? There was something wrong. A huge, bulging lump covered in moss and dirt. The kind of thing you'd normally see on an old tree and never think twice about, but something about it made a breath catch. It looked unnatural, deliberate, almost like something was trapped inside. Rex wouldn't stop. His claws scraped against the bark, desperate and frantic. Grace reached out, brushing her fingers across the rough surface. Underneath all that moss and age, her gloves touched something that didn't belong. Metal. Cold metal. Something man-made, sealed inside a tree that had been growing for decades. She stepped back, her mind spinning, and radioed it in. Within 20 minutes, 2 officers arrived, then a local firefighter with cutting equipment. As they carefully worked through the hardened bark, the air filled with the smell of sawdust and old wood. Each cut revealed more of the mystery. And then a metallic clink, something solid falling through the layers of wood. Grace knelt and brushed away the remaining bark with her gloves. Letters appeared, weathered and faded but unmistakable. She read them once, twice. Her heart stopped. Missing since 1987. Property of Elliot Hawkins. The name hit her like a wave. Elliot Hawkins. She'd been in school when his story was everywhere. A 10-year-old boy who vanished from this forest 38 years ago. The search had been massive. At first volunteers, helicopters, search dogs, but eventually the leads ran out. The hope faded. The world moved on. His parents had passed away years ago without ever knowing what happened to their son. Grace felt something break inside her chest. The cutting continued. The officers worked in silence now. everyone understanding the weight of what they were doing. Piece by piece, the lump broke free until a rusted metal box slid out from inside the tree trunk. The wood had grown around it, essentially swallowing it whole over the decades. With trembling hands, Grace opened the box. Inside, wrapped in a decaying red scarf, was a small wooden toy truck, a school ID card, and a folded note sealed in plastic. The only reason it had survived at all. She unfolded it slowly, her breath catching as she read the childish handwriting. "If anyone finds this, please tell my mom I tried to come home, but the man said I couldn't. He locked me here. I heard sirens once. I yelled, but no one heard me. I'm scared. My name is Elliot Hawkins." The forest seemed to hold its breath. Even Rex went silent, as if he understood the magnitude of what was being revealed. Grace couldn't hold back anymore. Tears streamed down her face as she knelt there in the darkness, holding the last message from a child the world had forgotten. One of the officers spoke quietly, stating the obvious reality they all understood. The tree grew around it. Grace nodded, unable to speak. Somewhere in these woods, decades ago, someone had hidden this box, and then the rest of the story was too awful to finish. But Rex wasn't done. He barked again, suddenly, and moved to the opposite side of the tree. He began digging frantically, his paws throwing dirt into the air. Grace rushed over with her light, her hands already shaking. Something white poked through the soil. Bones. Small bones. Grace knelt beside him, carefully brushing away layers of dirt and leaves. A child's shoe appeared, half buried and weathered by time. And there, carved into the leather and faded ink, were the initials EH. Everything made sense now. All of it. This whole time, Elliot had been here in T's forest, under this tree, while investigations went cold, while years passed, while memories faded. He was here, and only a dog's instinct could bring him home. The next morning, the entire county knew. The forest was sealed off as a crime scene. Forensics confirmed everything. The remains belonged to Elliot Hawkins. After nearly 4 decades of mystery and heartbreak for anyone who'd known him, the truth had finally emerged from the earth. That evening, Grace stood by the tree again as the sun descended, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Rex sat beside her, his tail resting gently on her boot. She looked at him and just shook her head in wonder. "You know," she said softly, "I don't think that was a coincidence. I think you were supposed to lead me here." Rex looked up at her with those intelligent eyes, and for a moment, it felt like he understood everything. Grace smiled through her tears. "You gave a lost child his voice back? Boy! After all these years in silence, you gave him peace. You gave his family the answers they needed." She'd brought a small plaque from home and placed it carefully near the base of the tree. It reads simply, "In memory of Elliot Hawkins." Lost but never forgotten. As the wind moved through the leaves, Grace could have sworn she heard something, a faint, childlike sound carried on the breeze. Not quite laughter, but something close. Something like relief. Something like a thank you from a soul that had finally been found. That night, before driving home, Grace placed her hand on Rex's head. "Good job, partner," she whispered. He wagged his tail once, slow and steady, and for the first time in 38 years, that forest felt peaceful. Quiet, like a truth had finally been told, a circle finally complete. Sometimes the things we think are accidents are actually exactly where we're meant to be. Sometimes the answers we're searching for are waiting in the most unexpected places. And sometimes, all it takes is someone or something refusing to give up, refusing to let a story stay buried and forgotten. If this story moved you the way it moved millions of others, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment and let me know what you're feeling right now. And please, hit that subscribe button. There are so many more stories like this one waiting to be told, waiting to remind us that goodness still exists in this world. Share this with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Because stories, like Elliot's, deserve to be remembered. Always.